They say that when a wolf is rejected, the soul breaks. But they never tell you what happens when that wolf has 2 mouths to feed and nowhere to hide. Vanessa pressed her spine into the freezing brick of the alleyway. The wall was slick with grime, but it was the only thing keeping her upright. She didn't look like a Luna. She didn't even look like a shifter. In her oversized, threadbare coat and grease-stained jeans, she looked like a ghost haunting the streets of the human city. Beneath her coat, 2 small hearts hammered against her own. Mark and Mia. Vanessa felt Mark's skin. It wasn't just warm, it was searing, a fever shift. At 4 years old, his inner wolf was trying to claw its way out to protect him from the cold. But his body was too weak, too starved, to handle the transformation. "Mommy?" It was Mia. Her voice was a fragile needle in the dark. The little girl reached into her pocket and pulled out a single dry crust of bread. It was the size of a coin. She looked up at Vanessa, her eyes wide and hauntingly bright in the city's neon-blurred fog. "Mommy, if we eat today, will we starve tomorrow?" Vanessa felt a jagged blade of guilt twist in her gut. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Because just 10 feet away, a flashlight beam cut through the rain. Splash, splash, splash. Heavy boots, the smell of expensive leather and silver. Andreas Wolf's elite trackers. They were searching for a royal scent that hadn't been felt in 4 years. They were looking for the very children Vanessa was trying to keep invisible. Vanessa clamped her hand over Mia's mouth, pulling her deeper into the shadows. She watched the silhouette of a tracker pass the mouth of the alley. On the brick wall opposite them, the man's shadow stretched, merging with the shape of a massive, predatory wolf. "He's close," her inner wolf whispered, a weak, dying whimper in the back of her mind. "The Alpha King is in this city. He's breathing the same air, eating at a table of gold, while his son burns with fever in the dirt." Vanessa closed her eyes, a single hot tear cutting through the soot on her cheek. Andreas Wolf, the man who had looked at her with eyes like ice and told her she was a mistake. The man who had sat on a throne of power while he ordered her exile. He thought she had fled alone. He thought he had no heirs. But as Mark let out a low, guttural whimper that sounded far too much like a pup's growl, Vanessa knew the secret was leaking. The fever was forcing the wolf out. And if Andreas found them now, he wouldn't see a family. He would see a threat to his power. Vanessa stood up, her legs shaking. She couldn't stay in the alley. She had to move. She had to go to the only place where she was truly invisible. The heart of the beast itself. Wolf Industries. The lobby of Wolf Industries was a cathedral of glass and cold ambition. It didn't matter that the sun was rising outside. In here, the light was artificial, sterile, and unforgiving. Vanessa moved the mop in slow, rhythmic circles. Her reflection in the polished marble floor looked like a smudge, a shadow that didn't belong in a place this bright. Her hands throbbed. The skin across her knuckles was cracked, the fissures weeping red from the harsh, industrial bleach she'd been using for hours. Every time she dipped the mop into the bucket, the chemicals bit into her open sores, a stinging reminder of her new reality. She wasn't a Luna here. She was employee 4092, a ghost in a gray jumpsuit. She had hidden Mark and Mia in the sub-basement, tucked behind the massive humming hum of the industrial heaters. It was dangerous, but it was warm. And in this city, warmth was more expensive than blood. The elevator chimed, a clean, melodic sound that signaled the arrival of the elite. Vanessa's breath hitched. She kept her head down, her hair falling like a curtain to hide her face. She knew that scent before he even stepped into the room. It was the scent of a thunderstorm in a forest, powerful, wild, and devastatingly familiar. Andreas Wolf walked across the lobby. His boots clicked against the marble with the rhythm of a heartbeat. He was draped in a heavy cloak, lined with a velvet so deep and rich it looked like a fresh wound. It was a king's garment. It was an insult. In Vanessa's world, colors were faded and gray, washed out by poverty and rain. But Andreas was vibrant. He was the sun, and she was the dirt he didn't even realize he was stepping on. He walked past her. He didn't slow down. He didn't look. The air he displaced carried the smell of expensive wood smoke and the kind of confidence that only comes from never knowing hunger. Isn't it funny? He smells like power and the finest wood smoke, while she smells like bleach and desperation. They are 3 feet apart, yet they are in different universes, and he has no idea. He has absolutely no clue that he's walking past the only woman who ever truly loved him. He's looking for a legacy in boardrooms. Oh, while his real legacy is shivering in his own basement. Vanessa waited until the elevator doors hissed shut. Her heart was beating so hard it made her dizzy. She had to move. She had to eat. She made her way to the executive lounge on the 4th floor. The board meeting had just ended. Through the glass doors, she saw the remnants of a feast. Trays of half-eaten Wagyu sliders, hand-cut fruit, pastries that cost more than her monthly rent. Her stomach didn't just growl, it cramped, a sharp, twisting pain that made her eyes water. She checked the hallway. Empty. With trembling, blood-stained hands, she reached onto a tray. She grabbed 2 sliders, wrapping them quickly in a paper napkin and shoving them deep into the hidden pocket of her jumpsuit. She reached for a 3rd, for herself. But a voice cut through the silence like a whip. Still scavenging, I see. Vanessa froze. Her blood turned to ice. Standing at the end of the lounge was Caleb, the lead beta. The man who had whispered lies into Andreas's ear 4 years ago. The man who had personally escorted her to the pack borders and told her that if she ever returned, he'd make sure she disappeared for good. He walked toward her, his nose wrinkled in an expression of pure, unfiltered disgust. He didn't recognize her. Not yet. To him, Vanessa was just another low-life human janitor with messy hair and a bent back. But the scent of her fear seemed to amuse him. "You people are like rats," Caleb sneered, flicking a piece of lint off his sleeve. "Give you a clean floor, and you still find a way to infest it. If I catch you touching the executive catering again, I won't just fire you. I'll make sure you're blacklisted from every gutter in this city." Vanessa didn't look up. She couldn't. If he saw her eyes, the specific flecked silver of a Luna, it would all be over. "I'm sorry, sir," she whispered, her voice husky and forced. "It won't happen again." Caleb let out a short, sharp laugh. "See that it doesn't. You smell like a wet dog. Get out of my sight." Vanessa clutched the stolen food against her ribs and hurried toward the service stairs. She had the sliders. She had a way to keep Mark and Mia quiet for one more night. But as she ran, she couldn't shake the feeling of Caleb's eyes on her back. She was in the heart of the beast, and the walls were starting to close in. Vanessa didn't run. Running made people look suspicious. Instead, she walked with the heavy, rhythmic gait of someone who had long ago traded her pride for a paycheck. The stolen sliders felt like hot lead in her pocket, warming her thigh. Every step away from Caleb felt like a victory, but the air in the stairwell was thin, stale. She reached the sub-basement, a place where the air was thick with the smell of rust and old grease. The boilers groaned like dying beasts, providing the only warmth in the entire steel skyscraper. "Mia? Mark? I'm back," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the mechanical roar. She hurried toward their corner, a small nest made of discarded moving blankets and a ragged tarp. Mia was there, curled into a tight ball, her thumb caught between her teeth as she slept fitfully. But the space beside her was cold. Mark was gone. Vanessa's heart didn't just skip, it stopped. Her lungs seized. She looked at the wall behind the blankets. The heavy ventilation grate, held in place by years of grime and a single loose screw, had been pushed aside. "Mark!" she hissed, her voice cracking. "Mark, come out!" Silence. She looked at the dark mouth of the vent. Mark had always been the curious one. The brave one? The one whose inner wolf was already pacing, hungry for space, hungry for more. Driven by the scent of the food upstairs, or perhaps just the restless call of his blood, he had crawled into the labyrinth. Vanessa dropped to her knees, looking at the vent. It was too small for her. She was trapped on the outside, while her son wandered into the guts of the building owned by the man who would destroy him if he knew he existed. 40 stories above, the air was different. It smelled of expensive parchment, rain-washed glass, and the cold, sharp scent of Andreas Wolf. The Alpha King sat behind a desk carved from a single piece of obsidian. He wasn't looking at spreadsheets or treaties. He was staring at the window, watching the city lights flicker through the rain. He felt restless, an itch beneath his skin that he couldn't scratch. Since he had stepped off that elevator this morning, his wolf had been pacing, snarling at shadows. Then he heard it, a faint scratching, metallic, small. Andreas didn't move, but his eyes narrowed. He was a king. He was used to assassins. He was used to the desperate. He expected a drone or a high-tech breach. A heavy thud echoed from the ceiling. One of the acoustic tiles groaned, then buckled. With a violent snap, the tile shattered. A small, tangled figure fell through the gap, crashing onto the obsidian desk before rolling onto the plush Persian rug. Andreas was on his feet in a heartbeat. His hand was already reaching for the concealed silver blade beneath his desk. "Security," he growled, his voice a low vibration that made the glass carafes on his bar rattle. He moved toward the intruder, expecting a shifter scout. Instead, he found a boy. Mark scrambled to his feet, gasping for air. He was covered in gray insulation dust and soot. His tattered shirt was torn at the shoulder, revealing skin that was pale and smudged with dirt. He looked like a street urchin, a beggar. "Who sent you?" Andreas demanded, his voice dropping into a dangerous, predatory register. "Who told you how to get into the vents?" Mark didn't answer. He was frozen. His small chest heaved as he stared up at the giant in the suit. He looked at Andreas's face, the sharp jaw, the cold eyes, the power that radiated off him like heat from a furnace. Andreas reached out, his large hand intended to grab the boy's collar and drag him to the security team. He was disgusted. How had a human child breached his sanctuary? But as his hand drew close, the boy's survival instinct flared. Mark didn't scream. He didn't beg. He growled. It was a small, high-pitched sound, but it carried a vibration that hit Andreas like a physical blow. The boy's pupils dilated, swallowing the brown of his irises until they disappeared. Then they shifted. A brilliant, supernatural amber erupted in the boy's eyes. They glowed with a feral, ancient light, the exact shade of the wolf bloodline, the light of a royal alpha. Andreas froze. His hand stopped inches from the boy's chest. Do you see his face? Look at Andreas. That isn't anger anymore. That's the look of a man who just saw a ghost. He hasn't seen that specific shade of amber in 4 years. Not since the night he told Vanessa she was a mistake. Not since he was told his line had ended in a bloody hospital room. The silence in this office is the loudest thing in the world right now. Andreas's heart hammered against his ribs. The scent hit him then. It wasn't just dust and sweat. Beneath the grime was the faint, unmistakable scent of winter pine and blood orange, his mate's scent. Vanessa? He whispered, the name of a ghost on his lips. Mark saw the opening. He didn't know who this man was, only that his mother had warned him to stay away from the men in suits. He bolted. He didn't head for the vent. He dived for the heavy oak door, chose his small feet silent as he tore down the executive hallway. Andreas didn't press the security alarm. He didn't call Caleb. He didn't even grab his cloak. He simply walked out of the office, his eyes fixed on the small shadow disappearing around the corner. His wolf was no longer pacing, it was hunting, and for the first time in 4 years, the Alpha King felt a flicker of hope that burned more painfully than any rejection. Andreas Wolf didn't run, but he moved with a terrifying predatory grace that ate the distance between him and the boy. Every breath he took was a serrated blade in his lungs. The scent was getting stronger. Winter pine, blood orange, and the sharp, metallic tang of fear. He reached the sub-basement. The air here was heavy with the smell of industrial grease and old, stagnant water. It was a tomb of steel and concrete. At the end of the flickering hallway, near the roaring boilers, he saw a shadow move. Vanessa was on her knees, her back to him. She was frantically pulling Mia into her arms, trying to shove her deeper into a nest made of discarded moving blankets and tattered rags. Mark had made it back. He was huddled behind her, his small body shaking so hard his teeth were chattering. Vanessa? The name left Andreas's throat like a prayer he'd forgotten how to speak. He stopped 10 feet away, his chest heaving. His expensive suit, his polished world, none of it mattered here. Vanessa froze. She didn't turn around at first. She just stiffened, her fingers digging into the rough fabric of the blankets. When she finally rose, she didn't look like the broken girl he'd sent away 4 years ago. She looked like a wolf with her back to a cliff. Vanessa, you're... Andreas's voice broke. He reached out a hand, his fingers trembling. They told me the rogue attack. That you were gone, that the pregnancy was... Don't. Vanessa's voice was a low, dangerous rasp. She stepped in front of the children, shielding them with her thin, bruised body. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. Her eyes were hard as flint, burning with a cold, white-hot fury. Don't you dare say my name, Andreas! She spat, the words jagged and raw. You lost the right to speak the second you looked at me and called us a mistake. You left us in the snow. You signed the order. You sent us to die. Andreas's eyes drifted past her. He saw them. Mia, with her thumb in her mouth, her eyes wide and wet with terror, and Mark, clutching a napkin that had fallen to the floor, the napkin containing the stolen cold Wagyu sliders. The Alpha King looked at the feast. He looked at the grease-stained bread. Then he looked at the concrete floor where his heirs, the blood of the wolf line, were sleeping. Do you feel the shift in the air? The pressure is rising so fast the pipes are starting to moan. Look at Andreas's hands. He's looking at a piece of cold meat on a dirty floor and realizing that while he was complaining about the temperature of his vintage wine, his children were learning how to survive on his garbage. This isn't just a discovery. It's a slaughter of his pride. I didn't know, Andreas whispered, his voice thick with a sudden, agonizing realization. Caleb said the clinic was empty. He said you fled with a human lover. He said exactly what you wanted to hear so you could sleep in your velvet bed, Vanessa screamed. You didn't look for us. You didn't check. You were happy to be rid of the weak Omega and her half-breed pups. The heavy steel door at the top of the stairs groaned open. Caleb stepped into the basement. He had 2 security guards with him, their hands on their tasers. The beta looked at Vanessa with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes, until he saw Andreas standing in the shadows. Caleb's face went bone white. Alpha? Caleb stuttered, stepping forward. I saw the breach. This janitor, she's a thief. She stole from the executive lounge. I was just coming to clean up the mess, to dispose of them. Dispose of them? Andreas's voice was no longer human. It was a vibration that started in the floorboards and rose through the walls. He turned slowly. His eyes weren't just amber. They were glowing with a blinding, incandescent gold. You told me she was dead, Caleb. Alpha, listen, she was a distraction. You were meant for greatness, not a... Andreas didn't let him finish. The shift was violent. There was no slow transition. 1 second, he was a man in a ruined suit. The next, the air exploded with the sound of tearing fabric and snapping bone. A massive charcoal gray wolf, the size of a small vehicle, occupied the hallway. The growl that left his throat didn't just scare the guards, it shattered the glass covers on the pressure gauges. Andreas didn't hunt Caleb. He leveled the room. With one swipe of a massive paw, he sent the guards flying into the concrete walls. He pinned Caleb against the boiler, his enormous jaws inches from the beta's throat. The heat from the boiler began to singe Caleb's hair, but it was nothing compared to the heat of the alpha's rage. Vanessa watched, her arms wrapped around Mark and Mia. For the first time in 4 years, she saw the monster she had feared. But he wasn't looking at her. He was standing between her and the man who had tried to erase her existence. Andreas didn't kill him. Not yet. He wanted Caleb to feel every ounce of the terror Vanessa had felt in that alley. He wanted him to smell the bleach and the desperation. The alpha turned his massive head back toward the nest of blankets. He looked at Vanessa, his golden eyes softening, a low, mournful whimper vibrating in his chest. He had found them, but looking at the scars on Vanessa's hands, he realized finding them was only the beginning of his penance. The air in the basement was thick with the scent of ozone and iron. Andreas stood in the center of the room, his expensive shirt shredded, his chest heaving. He looked at the elevator, the golden path back to his penthouse, his silk sheets, and his filtered water. Then he looked at Vanessa. The car is waiting, Andreas whispered, his voice raw, stripped of its royal command. Vanessa, please. There are doctors, a feast. I'll burn the city down to build you a palace by morning. Vanessa didn't move. She didn't look at the elevator. She looked at the 2 sliders sitting on a grease-stained napkin on the floor. Her stomach didn't just hurt. It felt like it was folding in on itself, a hollow ache that made her lightheaded every time she looked at the food she couldn't afford. But she wasn't going to let him buy her forgiveness with a limousine. "No," she said. The word was small, but it hit harder than his alpha roar. "Vanessa, the pups, they're cold. They're hungry." "They've been cold for 4 years, Andreas. They've been hungry for 1,460 days. She stepped toward the blankets, pulling Mark and Mia close. "If you want to be their father, you don't start with a palace. You start here, in the dirt, where we lived while you were a king." Andreas looked at his polished boots, then at the filth on the floor. He didn't argue. He didn't pull rank. Slowly, the Alpha King sat. He lowered himself onto the cold, cracked concrete. He took off his heavy, velvet-lined cloak, the one that cost more than a human's life, and he didn't wrap it around himself. He spread it over the oil-stained floor, creating a barrier between his children and the cold. He sat there, his back against a rusted pipe, and watched them. He watched Mark finally take a bite of the cold bread. He watched Mia fall into a fitful sleep, her small hand clutching the edge of his expensive sleeve. Look at him. He thought he was a king. He thought power was measured in territories and gold. But in that basement, with the smell of bleach in his nose and his family's hunger in his heart, he realized he was just a man. A man who had almost lost everything that actually mattered. The crown didn't make him a leader. The dirt did. Outside, the rain began to fall again, drumming a steady, lonely rhythm against the sidewalk grates above. Vanessa leaned her head against the brick, her eyes never leaving the man who was finally, painfully, learning the cost of tomorrow. Vanessa chose to make her king wait in the dirt, because some wounds don't heal just because a palace door opens. But I want to know, would you have let Andreas stay, or was his penance enough? If you felt every bit of Vanessa's fire today, don't just walk away. Join our pack by hitting that subscribe button. We tell the stories the alphas tried to hide. My name is Pauline. I'll see you in the next one.